Have you ever been asked, what safety training do we have to do? Like, I know we should do it all, it's all important, but like, what is essential? If you've ever wondered that, or if you've ever been asked that by a boss or by a manager, this episode is for you. I'm going to talk about the 4 essential safety trainings that every single company should be doing. And then I'm going to tack on one more that everyone should also be doing, but sometimes isn't thought of as a safety training. So stick around to the end and I'll share that bonus one with you. But right now, let's jump into the 4 essential safety trainings that every company needs. Hey, in case you haven't already done so, please check out my website, helpwithosha.com. You can go there and actually get a free OSHA audit checklist. This is the best way to prepare your team for an unexpected OSHA audit, and it's free. It's very helpful. It's free. Check it out today. Now, let's talk about the 4 safety trainings every single company needs to do. These are trainings that I make sure to include in orientation, and I want to make sure every single manager understands the importance of these 4. Doesn't mean we don't have more trainings that are important. Doesn't mean that your company doesn't have specific trainings that are important. But honestly, these are kind of the 4 pillars of safety when it comes to a manufacturing or a food processing company. So the very first one, and we're starting with a big one, your emergency action plan. Now, this is going to include a few different parts. Number 1, fire preparedness, making sure you have fire extinguishers, making sure that your team knows what the fire alarm sounds like, making sure they know where to go. All of this is going to be covered in your emergency action plan. And then that training needs to grow out of that plan so that everyone's clear on what to do, where to go, and who is in charge, who's the emergency coordinator that's going to be doing a head count and making sure everybody got out safe. Now, this also includes severe weather. It might include hurricane preparedness. Heck, it could include earthquake preparedness depending on where you are. And all of my emergency action plans that I work with my clients on, I include an active shooter. And then the other one is chemical release. If you have any kind of chemicals on the property, you want that procedure to be in there as well. And that might not be just the same evacuation as a fire. That might be an evacuation where we actually have to determine which way the wind is blowing and where the chemical's coming out of. So all of that training is going to be included in the emergency action plan training. Basically, you tell your employees, this is what we do if there's an emergency. Now, like I said, that's a lot of information. So some companies will opt to break it into smaller chunks. Lots of times you'll say, hey, we're going to cover fire extinguishers in a weekly talk. We're going to cover chemical release in another talk. We're going to talk about severe weather over here. But as long as you are communicating that out, that is one of the core central safety trainings you can do with your team. Now, after emergency action plan training, the next training that is really top of mind is hazard communication. Hazard communication is essentially chemical safety training. And what I mean by that is everybody needs to understand the chemicals that are kept on site. So your hazard communication safety program is going to contain your safety data sheets. It's going to have a chemical inventory, talk about signage. It's more about communicating what people are working with. We want everyone to know where the safety data sheets are located. We want people to know what kind of PPE to wear when they're using different chemicals. Do they need a respirator? Do they need to do it, in a special area that's well ventilated? All of that will feed into the hazard communication training. So it's customized to your company depending on what kind of chemicals you use. I cut my teeth working in fiberglass with boat building and boat manufacturing. So we had resin and catalyst and gel coat and acetone. We had all kinds of chemicals, and it was absolutely critical that on the first day on the job, people went to an orientation to understand how the chemicals needed to be stored and when we were going to use them. Well, one of the biggest catastrophes that was averted, as I one time saw a brand new employee that was beginning to mix two chemicals together that would have been disastrous. So we want to make sure people know what chemicals they're working with. There's no secrets. Everyone has a right to know the chemicals. So that's number 2. Number 3, the third safety training that is really critical and essential is, you might have been waiting for this one, lockout, tag out. Lockout, tag out. Or as I like to call it, not just for maintenance people. You see, lots of times companies fall into the trap of doing lockout, tag out only with maintenance personnel. It needs to be covered with everybody. Everybody in your facility needs to know what lockout is. They need to have it at an awareness level or an affected employee level. So affected employee lockout training needs to be covered in your orientation, and we need to make sure that we are communicating this is what lockout is. I go back, my first job, you probably remember your first job. My very first job, I remember sitting through a lockout training and having no idea what the trainer was talking about. And as he explained it, it's like he started to talk faster. I think he was getting paid by how fast he got this information out of his mouth. And I just remember sitting there in the room going, what in the world was he talking about? And I'll never forget, I walked out of the room and I leaned over to the guy next to me, and his name was Sonny. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I said, Sonny, what was that all about? And he goes, doesn't matter, you're not maintenance. Now, that wasn't the best advice because it does matter. Everyone needs to know why we do lockout and the purpose behind it. And then the people that are going to be authorized to perform lockout, lots of times this is QA, could be maintenance employees, could be supervisors or managers. They need to know what the actual procedures are for your specific equipment. So every single piece of equipment needs its own procedure. And then on top of that, we got locks, we got tags, we got different types of devices to lock out special types of energy. There's a whole lot that goes into a lockout program, but training, it's crucial. You want to at least give everybody an awareness level, and then for the people that are actually going to be on the floor doing the work, they need to be trained as an authorized lockout, tag out employee. All right, so that was number 3. The very last one, rounding out the end of it, is going to be personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment. We all know it as PPE. Essentially, people need to know what to wear while on the job. They shouldn't have to be guessing. They shouldn't be looking at people next to them to figure out, do I need to be wearing gloves? Do I need to have earplugs in? Do I need a respirator? All of that should be covered in a training class so they understand, hey, when I'm in my department, I have area-specific PPE. Anybody in this room is going to be wearing safety glasses. Anybody in this room is going to have steel toes on. But we also need to know task-specific PPE. When I'm using this machine, I'm going to be wearing these gloves. Or I'm going to be wearing a respirator when I'm using this kind of grinder. Whatever it is, it's important to explain what the PPE is used for, and then also how to store it, how to make sure it stays clean, how to get replacements when you need it. These are all things that your employees, they shouldn't be guessing or asking each other or kind of looking around to figure out what to do. It really should be clear what is required. One of the best things you can do is actually have a picture on the wall showing what PPE is required in what work area. Not just a list of items, but actually a picture that shows exactly what kind of gloves and what kind of apron or anything like that. It's really, really helpful. All right, so if you've been keeping score, we went through 4 main topics. These are the essential safety trainings: emergency action plan training to explain how employees need to handle an emergency. We had hazard communication, chemical training, making sure people know all about the chemicals they're working with, how to use them, how to store them, what kind of gear to wear. Then we followed up with lockout, tag out. This is critical. We got to make sure we're doing lockout, tag out. And lastly, we rounded out with PPE. Now, PPE, we talked about general PPE. Of course, there's going to be specific safety trainings if you have fall protection, or if you have hearing protection, or if you have respirators. Different types of PPE are going to require specific trainings, but as a whole, that has got to be something that you have a priority on. Now, the fifth, the bonus one, if you stuck with me this far, I want to share the bonus one, because this to me is just common sense. But I found common sense isn't always what people use when they come to safety. So I want to make sure we're clear on this. Part of the emergency action plan often includes what to do if somebody gets seriously injured on the job. I would pull out a separate training and do it at least once a year, accident response training. Now, hear me out, because this is not CPR, it's not first aid, it's not AED or bloodborne pathogen. This training is specifically designed to teach supervisors and managers how to handle an employee that gets injured. And also it teaches employees what to do if they get hurt on the job. So they know exactly, number one, this is like the most important part of the whole thing, the pinnacle of everything is report all accidents and incidents to your immediate supervisor. So we're going to report everything to our immediate supervisor, but this kind of training can explain how. A lot of companies are using QR codes, they're using paper forms, they're using some kind of Dropbox. You want to make sure your employees know what to do when they get hurt on the job. It needs to be reported immediately, and from there, we make sure the employee has medical care, that they're taken care of. Then we start figuring out what caused the accident. How did they get hurt? Because we want to know how we can prevent it from happening again. So those are the 5 essential safety trainings everybody should be doing. So 5 written programs go with that. But to me, these are kind of the pillars when it comes to safety. You want to make sure you got good communication between what's in your written program to getting it out on the floor to your team and to your managers and supervisors. So having said all that, until we talk again, make sure you do everything you can to keep the people you work with safe, because no one should get hurt at work.